Hello and welcome to EWTN special coverage of the canonizations of Blessed Carlo Acutis and Pier Giorgio Frassati, coming to you from the Eternal City. And what a beautiful morning it is here in Rome. And I say good morning because if you're watching this now in Europe, well then you are watching live and it's great to have you with us. If you're watching across the pond in the United States, well then you're watching a little bit later today because we're broadcasting this at 1 p.m. Eastern. So we're time traveling a bit. But if you have friends in the US, you're watching in Rome, tell them to set their alarms and get ready to watch later on. Tomorrow, these two young men, beloved for their vibrant faith and their witness of holiness, will become saints, and they will be canonized during the same Mass, which we will carry live here across the entire global network on EWTN, with our coverage starting at 9 a.m. local time here in Rome. So please do check your local listings again. No matter where you're watching in the world, we'd love you to join us. But back to today. Over the next hour, in this special pre-canonization program, I'll be joined by a host of guests to really learn more about these two soon-to-be saints who lived a century apart, but both lived very recently in the life of the Church. For example, Carlo Acutis was only 15 years old when he passed away in 2006 from leukemia, and he is considered the first millennial saint of the Catholic Church. He was in one way like so many other young men his own age. He was interested in computer games, in technology, in hanging out with his friends. But in other ways, he was completely unique. From a young age, he had a great love for the Holy Eucharist, and he even created a website documenting Eucharistic miracles around the world. And coming up, we'll be learning more about his life and what has put him on a path to sainthood, including hearing from an author who has written extensively about his entire life. We'll hear from those who he has inspired and his own mother. And then from one Italian blessed to another, Pier Giorgio Frassati. He was only 24 years old when he died in 1925. Frassati was an avid mountaineer and dedicated to social justice. He was known for his outreach to the poor and the sick. Joining the St. Vincent de Paul Society, he dedicated much of his time to the homeless and injured soldiers who were returning to Italy from World War I. He was also known for his charm and enthusiasm, which he used to spread the faith among his family and friends, especially those who had fallen away from the faith. Well, this is going to be a really special weekend here in Rome, but also right around the world, as we know a lot of you will be joining us who couldn't make it here to the Eternal City. These two young, inspiring men, both from northern Italy, will be the first saints of Pope Leo XIV's pontificate. And these canonizations come, remember, right after the Jubilee of Youth, which brought, by some estimates, more than 1 million young people from around the world here to Rome for several days. Together, they listened to talks, they processed through the streets, they took part in worship and dozens of other events. And this was all leading up to the celebrating of Mass in Tor Vergata with the Holy Father, taking part in adoration, being with each other, learning about their different cultures, inspiring each other in their faith. It was incredible to see such a sea of youth from around the planet. It was an incredible thing, all there for Jesus Christ and their love of the Catholic faith. Well, we spoke to pilgrims who are gathering here in Rome. Some have already been here for the Jubilee on Youth. Some came for the canonizations that were meant to happen, but of course stayed for the funeral of Pope Francis. But they've been gathering again in the Eternal City, and we spoke to them here in the street about their excitement for this moment. Take a listen.
They show us it's possible to be sent nowadays, you know. Like Carlo, it's from our millennium. He's young like us. Electronic things and all these stuffs we also use, he used it too. So it shows like even nowadays we can, in our ordinary days, studying, working, being young, we can also be sent, and that's really, really awesome.
I think they will be recognized for their efforts to be good people, and we can all learn from this and become better Christians.
They were a very kind person, and I think their ideas inspired me a lot to be who I am today.
Just some of the many pilgrims who are making their way to the Eternal City, many more, of course, arriving today. And we're taking a look now at a live shot of St. Peter's Square on this glorious morning here in Rome. Tomorrow, that will be filled with people of all ages, joyful to celebrate these canonizations. So again, be sure to tune in, 9 a.m. Rome time if you're watching here in Europe. That'll be 3 a.m. for those of you who want to watch, 3 a.m. Eastern in the United States. That live coverage here will be an hour before the canonization, leading right up to that Mass. And of course, we'll have the full thing here on EWTN across the global network. Now, to get better acquainted with these saints, we're going to begin by taking a look at Blessed Carlo Acutis. Born in 1991, he was part of the digital age that was just emerging at the time. Our reporter, Alan Holdren, explains more.
In 1991, the launch of the World Wide Web marked a technical achievement that would forever change human lives. In 1991, the same year the World Wide Web was launched, a boy named Carlo Acutis was born in Italy. He would go on to harness this groundbreaking technology to impact others' lives profoundly. Carlo epitomized a typical 90s kid, enjoying his PlayStation and the vast new opportunities provided by the internet. However, he was also deeply religious. By the age of 11, he had created a website that cataloged Eucharistic miracles, merging his tech skills with his devout faith.
Carlo didn't understand why some of his peers didn't have the same understanding and devotion to the Eucharist. He asked his parents, why do we see people lining up for soccer games or rock concerts, long lines, big crowds, but we don't see people lining up to see the Blessed Sacrament? And so for 2 years, Carlo worked with his family to produce an exhibition on Eucharistic miracles throughout history and around the world. And this premiered during the Year of the Eucharist, proclaimed by Pope John Paul II.
Antonia Salzano, the mother of Carlo Acutis, notes that after his first communion at age 7, Carlo never missed an opportunity to receive the Eucharist, drawing strength from it to live a life of integrity. This profound connection to Christ also gave him the fortitude to accept his terminal diagnosis when it was unexpectedly delivered by his doctor.
Carlo,
when they told him that he had leukemia, that it was a disease that he could even die of, he smiled and said, "The Lord gave me a beautiful alarm clock," as if to say, "My time has come." Then he said, "I'm not coming out of this alive, Mom, but I'll give you many signs. Don't worry."
Carlo died of leukemia in 2006 at the age of 15.
Certainly many people remember this funeral. It seemed more like a feast than a funeral, but indeed, I think the festivity was because Carlo then ended up in heaven immediately. As he had asked the Lord, "I offer my sufferings for the Pope and the Church, in order not to go to purgatory, but to go directly to heaven." And I believe that the Lord listened to him.
Born in London and raised in Milan, Carlo Acutis is now entombed in the Church of St. Mary Major and the Sanctuary of the Spoliazione in Assisi's Old Town. The term spoliazione, which translates to divesting, refers to St. Francis of Assisi's renunciation of wealth.
I, as usual, am saying that Carlo is my little teacher, because he is teaching me so much, above all, to rediscover two great treasures of my life, the Eucharist and love for the Virgin Mary. He was able to say the Rosary every single day, and also go to Mass every day. And then, another thing that comes to me so much is his totality in God. For him, there was no halfway. It was all or nothing. When he said before he died that he didn't mind dying yet, so young, because he hadn't lost even a minute of his life doing things that didn't please God. And he said, to always be close to Jesus, that's my life's plan. And this strikes me very much. I too want that totality in God.
Another great phrase from Carlo that sums up his devotion to the Eucharist is, Carlo liked to say, the people who place themselves in front of the sun get a tan, while people who place themselves in front of the Eucharist become saints.
Carlo Acutis has not only changed the life of his mother, who has found her way back to God through her son, he's also a role model for many young Christians today, because he showed that even simple actions can have a big impact.
Carlo believed that the best time to pray was during Mass, right after the consecration. He said this is the best time in which he liked to speak to Jesus and to ask for graces. And people in his parish actually commented they were struck seeing this 9-10-year-old little boy and how reverently he went up to receive communion and how he would sit and pray in silence and kneel before the tabernacle in prayer.
But Carlo Acutis' short life is also a challenge for every Catholic because it poses an important question.
If we really believe that Jesus is present in the Holy Eucharist, why don't we make every effort that we can to try to pray in front of the tabernacle and to receive the Blessed Sacrament as often as we can?
Thank you very much, Alan, for that look at the life of Carlo Acutis. And to talk more about Carlo Acutis and Pier Giorgio Frassati, I'm joined by Father Patrick, Mary Brisco. Now, Father, you have just been given a promotion, I believe, because people may know you from the Godsplaining podcast, among a host of others. But in the Dominican order, you are now
the General Promoter of Social Communications. How's that for a Roman title, Colm?
That's a great title. So what does that mean exactly?
It means essentially that I'm functioning now as the Communications Director for the Order.
That's
so
awesome.
The Master was very pleased. I said this morning, Father, I need a dispensation. I have to go down to I have to go down to Rome. I won't be at our morning prayers. I have to go down to the Vatican. And he says, well, that's excellent. You're doing your job.
You're doing your job. Well, that's great. And if that's your job, this is your office. Isn't it a beautiful morning here in Rome?
It's not bad at all to be with you. No, I had the most glorious walk as I was walking down from our Dominican headquarters on Santa Sabina down here to the Vatican, all along the Tiber River. Something out of a storybook. And one of the things that I was most excited to see is all the groups of young people that are coming. They'll be here for the audience with Pope Leo today, but also for the celebrations tomorrow for the canonizations.
Now, Father Patrick, we were just looking at the life of Carlo Acutis there. Blessed Carlo Acutis will be a saint tomorrow. And, you know, when we look at the lives of the saints, for a lot of young people, they can admire them, they can look up to them, but maybe find it difficult to relate because, well, I read about them in the history books, or they were from such a different time or a different era. But with someone like Carlo Acutis, they can really see tangible parallels between their lives and someone like Carlo Acutis. Isn't that right?
Well, it's true, and it's true not just for young people, but it's true for me. Carlo is a millennial like I am, and so he's someone that I really identify with, especially this idea of having a PlayStation and needing to limit your time on it. But one thing that I was so struck by as Carlo was growing in popularity was his mother's visit to the Catholic University of America just a few years ago. I had the opportunity to preach during the visit. It was one of the events. And as I found myself standing there in front of Antonia, I couldn't believe that I was face to face with the mother of a saint. You meet his family, you see how close he is, how proximate to us in history, and suddenly the faith and the prospect of holiness feel much more real.
Because when you look at the fact that he liked to play computer games, as we've been seeing, and into coding, but using his skills, modern day skills, for the faith and for spreading the faith, and his love for the Eucharist, do we know at kind of what stage that developed and where that came from? Understanding of the Eucharist. And love for it.
Yes, one thing that I think people get wrong about Carlo is they talk about him as just being a kind of average Joe, and this is the whole idea of the relatability, but they miss the transcendent piece, because as you say, Carlo used all these things in service of the gospel. He had the understanding that our lives are very short, and we should be living for eternity. It seems like the most important influence in Carlo's life was his Polish nanny, and that she was really the first one to teach him his prayers, to take him to church. But as Antonia relates, he had a kind of spontaneous religious affection, a spontaneous religious interest. We have a word for that in the Catholic tradition. It's called grace. Carlo received a special grace to love the Lord. And he used, again, this devotion to technology, this interest, we ought to say, to technology to allow others to come and experience the love that he experienced. So what he realized was, especially when it comes to the Eucharist, that people were unimpressed when you explain the catechesis, the theology of the Blessed Sacrament, everything we truly believe. But he could get their attention, he could wake them up if he began to talk a little bit about Eucharistic miracles. So this is part of his passion, promoting the Eucharistic miracles, not just because the miracles are interesting in themselves, they are. They're very interesting, they're fantastic. But because they got people's attention, and they woke people up to the reality that's being conveyed, the great gift that the Lord is giving us in the Eucharist.
And Father Patrick Murray, we talk a lot today about influencers, Catholic influencers. We had a jubilee for influencers here at the Vatican. Pope Leo has called them digital missionaries, and the power of social media to be digital evangelists online. But he's also talked about the dangers. But when you look at someone like Carlo Acutis, talk about being ahead of his time. Because although he was there at the dawn of the internet and the digital age, it was pre-social media, pre-influencers, but he was influencing in a way because he created a website to document all of these Eucharistic miracles. And you talk about the grace that he received and that grace working in his life, because being diagnosed with terminal leukemia at the age of 15 short years. Talk to me about how he was able to face that, what he knew was going to be the end of his life here on earth, and to face that with such grace and strength of faith.
Carlo absolutely was an influencer, and some people kind of shy away from that, or they think, well, should we really be calling the saint an influencer?
Yeah, because of the negative connotations that it might have today.
It could be a little bit, I understand it. It could be a little bit of the Wild West on social media. But what we ought to understand is that Carlo never used that for self-aggrandizement, right? He always used it to promote the church and the church's teaching. He was always trying to bring people to Jesus. It was always God for Carlo. It was never himself. And I like this point very much, that Carlo wasn't afraid to go out and to be involved. St. Paul would absolutely be using X. He would absolutely be on Instagram. There's no doubt in my mind. But Carlo took all of these things and made an opportunity, made a bridge, and allowed people to come through him to Christ. And this is what Pope Leo is encouraging all of us to be digital missionaries, to reach out in our worlds, to influence people for the better, to influence them for the Lord.
There's so many things that we could talk about here all morning in the beautiful eternal city, but we're going to learn more about the life of Pier Giorgio Frassati in just a moment, a little bio from Alan again. But to talk about him for a moment as we shift gears, the extraordinary thing about Frassati, again from northern Italy, is that he grew up with agnostic parents. So faith wasn't really encouraged in the house, and yet he went on to develop such a strong faith. And can that can be a very common thing for young people now, maybe watching in different parts of the world. What would you say to young people who maybe come from a household or a college environment or a group of friends where faith is not really encouraged, even sometimes discouraged?
It absolutely is increasingly common, and I have great sympathy for Gen Z on this point. But I'm quite inspired by them, because they're young men and women who are coming to faith despite the whole deck being stacked against them. So every day I'm moved by the stories and testimonies of these young Catholics that I'm hearing. But what we see in Frassati, the great example, what is the word of advice, is charity. Frassati wasn't controversial with his family. He wasn't antagonistic. Even though they were agnostic, Frassati was loving and charitable and dedicated. And I think that's the big thing, because one can be faithful in prayer without making a war of it. One can be committed to charitable acts, serving the poor, without making a big deal of it. These are the marks of Frassati's life, always serving and loving, but being steadfast despite the opposition.
A bit like you, Father, full of joy, always smiling. He was known to sing from the treetops as well at his summer residence.
Very poorly, in fact.
Yeah, that's what they said, that he didn't have a great singing voice. But why let that stop you?
He would sit in the back of the church so he didn't bother people, because he was so ashamed by it.
Isn't that amazing, the ability to let your joy show, and people will become curious. What is that source of joy and happiness? What is it that he has that we don't seem to have and that we want?
That's exactly right. And it sounds, on the one hand, when you first hear it, you say, well, that doesn't sound like it's exceptional. But then you meet someone who has that grace, and you realize what a special thing it is, in fact, and how encouraging it is, just to continue again to be persevering and to be unwavering.
Yeah, and to use that charisma, that enthusiasm to advertise the faith and promote the faith. And he would go hiking with his friends, and even when they weren't feeling up to it. We went on a pilgrimage recently, myself and Father Vincent. Bernard, who's the chaplain at NYU, he brought a group of 15 young men. We're going to show you a little bit of that later on in the program. But it was tough, because we hiked up the very same mountains Frassati hiked. And, halfway there, I was like, I want to go back. And I'm like, this is tough, I'm sweating. But you can imagine Pier Giorgio Frassati leading those young men, but his enthusiasm, his charm, keeping them going. And then they would talk about their faith when they got to the mountaintop. It's a powerful gift that we take for granted sometimes and we underestimate.
One of the stories about Pier Giorgio that I love is that his father finds him one night falling asleep praying the rosary, spending long hours in prayer. And the father goes to see the parish priest. Pier Giorgio's father goes to see the parish priest, and he's all concerned by this. And he says to the priest, essentially, you're making my son an extremist. He's praying every night. Yeah. I'm very worried about this. And the priest says, well, basically, would you rather he be reading inappropriate novels? And the father says, well, no, this is much better.
Because we're going to learn about that in a moment. The father was a very successful businessman who started one of the biggest publications, the Stampa, here in Italy. Very quickly, you have a connection. As a Dominican, tell me about the connection with Pier Giorgio
We're
Frassati.
so proud of our blessed Pier Giorgio. He was a great member of our order. He was a lay Dominican. So as a lay person, participating in the life of the order by his prayers and by his membership. When he joined Colm, he took the name Savonarola after the great Florentine preacher. And I think that gives you a sense of his fiery spirit, his great love for the gospel. But the other thing that drew him to the Dominicans was his great love for the rosary. So we have this story of him praying the rosary, his father being concerned, but also encouraging his friends to pray the rosary, often praying the rosary on the train, spreading the rosary. We know that the rosary still today is a powerful tool for evangelization and a great training method in prayer. So I love these aspects of Pier Giorgio's devotion to the order.
Father Patrick, Mary Brisco, it has been great talking to you once again and great to see you here in Rome.
My joy, Colm. Thanks for having me.
Now, a moment ago, Alan Holdren told us about the life of Blessed Carlo Acutis, and now we're going to learn more about the soon-to-be saint we were just talking about. Alan will tell us now about the life and times of Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati.
Nestled in amongst the Alps of northern Italy, the city of Turin gave the Church one of its most beloved modern witnesses of gospel living, Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati. The legacy of Pier Giorgio Frassati lives on in the places that shaped him and in the hearts of Turin's citizens. In the La Crocetta neighborhood of Turin stands the parish of the Blessed Virgin of Graces, a place of deep spiritual meaning for Pier Giorgio Frassati. It was here that he received his first communion and confirmation, and where he often spent time in daily Eucharistic adoration. A plaque now marks the spot where he would quietly kneel in prayer during Mass. The parish also holds his baptismal and death certificates, which uncovers some small but interesting details.
We can see that Pier Giorgio's middle name was Michelangelo. Then, we notice that the printed words baptized in church have been crossed out and replaced by a handwritten note, baptized at home. That's because Pier Giorgio was born with breathing difficulties, so they chose to baptize him immediately at home.
Pier Giorgio's grandmother, Linda, died on July the 1st, 1925. Just 3 days later, on July the 4th, Pier Giorgio passed away from polio, likely contracted while caring for one of the many poor families he regularly assisted. This series of losses deeply impacted the Frassati family and likely obscured the urgency of Pier Giorgio's condition.
Aware that his grandmother was in her final days, Pier Giorgio chose to keep his own suffering to himself, not wanting to cause worry or be a burden to those around him.
The parish stands directly across from the house where Pier Giorgio died. It was here during his funeral that Turin, and even his own family, truly realized the greatness of his life.
Imagine these very streets in front of us, completely filled with people. Pier Giorgio's family had no idea that such a crowd would gather right outside their home. That short walk from the Frassati house to the Crocetta parish became a true procession through the neighborhood, a public testimony of his life.
Un vero e proprio cammino per le strade del quartiere.
Alessandro Maria Greco organizes a Frassati tour for the youth of Turin, designed to help them better understand Pier Giorgio by visiting the places where he lived. The final stop on this special journey is the Turin Cathedral, where Pier Giorgio rests in peace.
Pier Giorgio was originally buried in the cemetery of Pollone, but as his example began to resonate more and more around the world, it became clear that he deserved a place of greater prominence. His remains were brought here, to the Cathedral of Turin, this very Duomo, so that the very significance of his life could be properly honored, as we're witnessing even now, in these very moments.
Nicolas Mendoza is a pilgrim from the United Arab Emirates who first learned about Pier Giorgio Frassati through Catholic media. From that moment on, his devotion to the young blessed from Turin began to grow in a deep and personal way.
He was a very relatable saint, because if you were to see the other saints like, like St. Francis of Assisi, St. Clare, St. Charles Borromeo, and St. John Bosco, a lot of people would see being a saint as you have to go to the vocation on being a priest or as a layman. But when I saw Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati, I realized I have no more excuse to be normal.
Thank you so much, Alan Holdren, there telling us more about the life and times of Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati. And to talk more, I'm joined here now by Father Luca Bertelli. Did I say that right?
Bertarelli.
Bertarelli. It's a beautiful Italian name. How are you today, Father?
Thank you. I'm very fine.
Now, your unique position is that you are from Pollone.
Yes.
And tell me about what you do in Pollone to promote the life of Pier Giorgio Frassati and the pilgrimages that you bring there.
Yes, with the welcome of pilgrims in Villa Metis, who is the house of Pier Giorgio, and when in this house we find the roots of Pier Giorgio family. Yes.
What surprises people when they come, the pilgrims, and they see the house, they see the roots? What surprises them the most?
I think that they understand that Pier Giorgio lives his time. Inhabitant is time. Is time. His fate was not risky leaps forward, and neither refuge in a mythical golden age of the faith. He anticipated in some way the Second Vatican Council and the life of that.
It must be a great joy for you as well, Father, to be there and surrounded by the spirit of Pier Giorgio Frassati and seeing how he has inspired so many others. What has it done for your own faith as well?
Oh yes, for my faith is a great gift, because he is a friend for me. He's a good friend for me, because he teach me how to pray, how to celebrate Eucharist. He was a laic, but it's strange, but his devotion to Eucharist teach me how to stay before the Eucharist. It's a miracle, I think.
Isn't it amazing that a century on, almost 100 years, that this young man, who like Carlo Acutis died when he was only 15 from leukemia. Pier Giorgio Frassati as well died in his 20s from an aggressive form of polio. But still, in a short life, the impact that he can have for decades and decades to come, and much more into the future, that's incredible, isn't it?
Yes, it's very incredible. But I think it's the miracle of God. God is eternal, and eternal is not just the life everlasting, but now, yesterday, and in the future. And I think it's
here in the present.
Yes.
We are here in Rome today. The Basilica and the Dome of St. Peter's is behind us. We can see the Apostolic Palace. I can look around at all the buildings, the Eternal City stretched out from our vantage point here in the EWTN studios. It is a beautiful day. Yeah. How do you feel being here for the canonization weekend?
A great joy, a great emotion, a great gratitude to God. To God, yes, a great gratitude. My heart is full of gratitude for that. Yes.
Tomorrow you will be there with all of the young people. Have you a big group coming with you?
We are more than 100 people.
100 people?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. From Pollone and Biella, not just from Pollone, but from the city, the big city. Okay.
And finally, Father, young people who are watching this, many people know everything about the life of, for example, Carlo Acutis. And even when I was on the Borgo Pio, the street here yesterday, some people were saying to me, tell me a bit more about, is it Frassati, is it? Pier Giorgio Frassati? Perhaps not as well known as Carlo Acutis, because Carlo Acutis has really captured the imagination of the mainstream media because of the millennial saint title and the fact that he was a computer programmer. But if someone was to ask you, a young person, tell me something extraordinary about Pier Giorgio Frassati, why should I look towards him? Why should I ask for his intercession? What would you say to them?
The extraordinary life of Pier Giorgio is ordinary life. I think it's beautiful because he lives his time, the university, friendship, family,
climbing the mountains.
Yes, climbing the mountains, all with a naturality, but with a great faith in God, and he bring into this life, into the city of man, the city of God, I think.
What was amazing too when I was learning about him, because I went on a pilgrimage walking in his footsteps, which we're about to take a look at in a second, but even though he was from a wealthy family, a well-to-do family, very successful, and his parents wanted him to continue in business in some way, he had other ideas, and he wanted to stay dedicated to the poor, the soldiers that were coming back from World War I, to attend to them. It's an incredible sense of social justice.
Yes.
We would call today social justice.
Social justice, who have, I think, who have the roots in the friendships of Pier Giorgio with people. The justice as friendship.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's beautiful. Father Luca Bertelli.
Yes.
Did I say it right?
Yes.
Luca Bertelli. We'll go for a cappuccino after this.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much,
Thank
Father
you.
Luca.
Thank you.
And he was mentioning his home. Well, I had the privilege of traveling with a group of 15 young men from across the great United States recently. They were on a pilgrimage with Father Vincent Bernard, the chaplain from NYU. We went to Turin, we went to Assisi, we went to lots of different sites connected with Pier Giorgio Frassati, but one of them was to his summer home, his summer residence, where he would sing from the top of the treetops. It was incredible, and here's a little clip of how we got on. On day 3 of the pilgrimage, the gang have to make the over 8-hour drive all the way down south to the town of Assisi.
Buongiorno.
Slept for, hold on, let me see, like an hour and a half.
On the bus, they pass the time by chatting and having fun. But also, something you wouldn't normally see in a bus full of young men, praying the rosary.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
To break up the journey, Father Vincent has a surprise stop planned in the town of Pollone, where Pier Giorgio would spend his summers, in the family's plush summer vacation house. The group get an opportunity to see inside the house, the paintings showing members of his family and those he loved, and also the items that were his and special to him. And outside is where a young Pier Giorgio would run around and play, and climb this tree in the garden, famously singing from the top. And it's under this very same tree that the group celebrate Mass. And during his homily, Father Vincent talks about the love Pier Giorgio had for God and others.
You know, the person who knows how to love, the person who is in love, sees the world in a different way. He does things differently. Like, love does things to you. It makes life better, makes you better, makes you see the world in a better way. And that's what brings everything to life. That's what makes everything shine. It's love. It's charity. And so when we think of Pier Giorgio Frassati, we've talked about he has direction, he has perseverance, but what brings it all to life is charity, it's love of God. It's love of God filling, increasing within him. And the more he loved God, the more he could love those around him. Remember, the essence of the Christian life is charity, but there's two commandments, love of God and love of neighbor. Love of God first, and from that you're able to actually love the poor, like Frassati. You're able to love your friends. He was even able to love his family when it was difficult. But it all came from putting God first and loving God above all things.
There you go. We will bring you more of that pilgrimage tomorrow. And if you haven't seen it, you can watch the entire documentary and follow those 15 young men from across the United States. And they were a lot of fun. Just go to the EWTN YouTube account and type in EWTN in the footsteps of Frassati. Now, Father Juan Gutierrez. Did I pronounce that right?
Kind of, yes.
Kind of. I'm on a roll. Father Juan, it is lovely to see you.
Thank you.
How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much.
I know Mexican descent, but you were in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles.
That's correct.
Now, we could talk for hours.
Yes.
Because I've researched your story. And just in a nutshell, before we talk about your incredible connection to Frassati and the miracle,
yes.
Tell me about your own story for a moment, if you will, because you come from, you were an atheist. You didn't believe in God.
Yes. I was born and raised in Mexico, near Mexico City, in a small town. And I was raised by my mother, along with 3 of my siblings. I'm the third of 4. My father and my parents split when I was little, so my father remarried, and I have 4 more brothers from his second marriage. And although my mother was religious and she made sure that I receive all my initiation sacraments, in my early teens, I step away from practicing the faith for many different reasons, and I declare myself a person who doesn't believe in God because there is no God.
You thought, that's it, we're here today, and no God, no such thing.
Yeah, that's what I used to think, yeah.
What was the turning point for you?
Well, then eventually when I was 19 years old, I moved to Omaha, Nebraska to live with my father. And eventually someone invited me to a retreat. I started to go to the retreat, get intrigued by what I heard, and did my own research.
Because I saw you say before, Father, that when they first asked you to go on a retreat, you said, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
I am not interested in these people. This is strange. This is weird.
Correct.
Count me out.
Yes, that was me.
That was you?
That was me. And, but I was intrigued, and I wanted to make sure, I wanted to find out if this was true. So I started to read world history and what is it that the information about this Jesus of Nazareth is out there. And eventually you come to realize that God is real. Jesus walked the earth, and he instituted the Catholic Church. So I was convinced by the truth of the truth.
What convinced you, Father? Because it's one thing understanding and studying historical Jesus Christ and understanding the history, even the culture of the Catholic Church. But what allowed you to take that leap of faith to believe, Son of God, God is real, in fact, and do a complete 180?
I will describe it as a process. Little by little, all the objections that I had against the faith started to fall down with evidence and reasons to believe there is a God, that Jesus is real, that the Catholic Church is the church he instituted, until I ran out of excuses not to be a practicing Catholic.
And Father Juan, that's not an easy position to be in, because it means you have to re-evaluate everything in your life.
For sure.
And again, it's a whole other story. We could talk about how today you're sitting here with a collar on in front of me. It's an incredible story. And Father Juan, let's turn our attention to Pier Giorgio Frassati.
Sure.
When did you first hear that name?
Exactly, I don't know. It was at some point during my seminary time. I might have been in my philosophy formation program.
And when you learned about his life, the type of man that he was, what he stood for,
well,
you know,
my friendship with Pier Giorgio started very casually. I watched a video of like about 10 minutes on YouTube about the life of Pier Giorgio, and that was about it. That was my initial connection with Pier Giorgio.
And then when did he become, as they say, real to you? And that you had a special connection to him?
Yeah, well, in 2017, September of 2017, I got injured playing basketball with my fellow seminarians from St. John's Seminary in Camarillo. And eventually I found out that I had a torn Achilles. And the following day, after I received my diagnosis, I started to think that maybe I should do a novena to ask God for help. I asked for help. And eventually, when my family and I do novenas, we invite a saint to help us with that intention. And I was thinking, since I started November 1st, Solemnity of All the Saints, to invite all the saints in heaven to pray with me. But then I received a little whisper in my heart that said, why don't you invite Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati? And I was just surprised by it, but I thought, yeah, that's a good idea. And that's what I did.
What happened after you did that? What changed?
I started to pray for a couple of days, and one particular day I was praying the novena in the chapel of the seminary when I started to feel a sensation of heat around the area of my injury. And at first I thought that maybe there was some sort of electrical outlet causing a fire, but I started to look for the fire and there was no evidence of fire, no smell of fire, but I realized that it was my ankle where I felt the sensation of like a gentle heat, but will increase little by little.
Like a burning sensation?
Yes, yes. Yeah.
And were you worried? Would you be, the natural reaction is you'd be, something's going wrong here?
No, because it wasn't painful. It was gentle, but you could feel it grow. So that's why I describe it as a warm sensation. It was not like uncomfortable or anything.
And then tell me about then the injury. What happened to the injury then after that sensation?
Well, I finished my prayer and I went on with my day. By then, I was already wearing all kinds of braces to help my foot be stable, immobilized until my surgeon kind of told me what to do because I was told that I needed a surgery to correct this. So I finished my novena November 9th. I went to see the surgeon November 15th. So when he checked looking for a torn Achilles, he couldn't find it.
It was gone.
It was gone.
Now, miracles come in all different shapes and sizes. For sure. Some on a small scale, some on a major scale.
Yeah.
This has been considered as one of the incredible miracles.
Yes.
For the skeptics out there who watch this and my friends who would say to me, oh, come on, these miracles. Tell me a bit about the process. I mean, these are verified, these are checked by medical experts.
Yeah.
The Vatican, when they're investigating the cause, they bring in skeptics in a panel and they say to them, here is what we believe, disprove the miracle theory. So it's put through a lot of checks and balances.
Yes. Well, the church is always looking for the truth. And with this process of investigating a miracle, they're looking for the truth with documentation so that we could prove that this is not our opinion, these are facts. So there's two teams working on this. One that is the medical experts, doctors that need to offer their opinion as doctors. If this is something that happens normally based on the treatment that I received. And there was even in the investigation a doctor that disproved that he said this was not a miracle, that in his opinion it wasn't. But again, his testimony was taken because the church takes testimonies for or against it. But then a majority of doctors, after seeing the evidence and the treatment that I received,
said there was no medical
explanation, so that in less than 9 days, a torn Achilles will just appear intact when a surgeon checks it.
How do you feel when you believe that, you were the subject of a miracle?
I'm still trying to find the answer to that, Obviously, it makes me feel grateful. I don't know who said it, but someone said it. Our God is a God of miracles, so miracles should not be that uncommon because they are not. Being here is a miracle. Breathing is a miracle. But it just fills me with gratitude and awe of the kind of God we have.
How does it feel now when you look at your entire journey of being an atheist, coming from Mexico to Nebraska, having your own, what is a miracle in one way, a conversion, entering the Catholic faith, then being ordained a priest, the Catholic priest, having a devotion to Pier Giorgio Frassati, having a miracle, helping him to become a saint, and now you're here in Rome for the canonization, which is going to happen tomorrow.
Yes.
How do you feel at this point?
It's been a crazy ride. Only God could do something like this, and I'm filled with gratitude and willing to go through it as joyfully as I can.
Father, it's been great talking to you from the Diocese of Los Angeles, and thank you so much for your time.
No problem. Thank you.
Now, the great thing about this program here on EWTN is that we are talking to so many different people. People like Father who have had these incredible stories of miracles, people who've been inspired by the lives of these two soon-to-be saints. But we also have direct contact with some of the family members. For example, recently EWTN News caught up with Wanda. She is the niece of Carlo Acutis. And here is the message. Frassati, I beg your pardon, Pier Giorgio Frassati. And here's a little clip from that interview.
The memory of him is very much alive, not only in our family, but all over the world. Truly, I wouldn't say it is surprising because he was so special. Even after 100 years, all over the world, young people still take him as an example, as a companion in life, someone you can walk through life with, thanks to his strength and to his faith. I think he was truly chosen by Christ as an example because his family was not particularly religious. And yet, Pier Giorgio, when he met a nun one day at the age of just 3 or 4, he said, "Quickly, pick flowers and bring them to Our Lady." Or another time, someone rang the doorbell. Little Pier Giorgio was the first to reach the door, and he saw a woman holding a child without shoes. Immediately, he took off his own shoes and gave them to the child. He was an example of how to find work for someone in need, how to go and sit for hours with a family that had lost someone, how to truly be a friend of the poor. That is more than just giving money. But it's very striking, because someone asked him once, "How do you manage to go into those poor homes? They were really very dirty places. How can you stand going into those filthy apartments?" His answer was, "Christ comes to me every day in Holy Communion. I try to repay him in some way by visiting his poor." And he added, "Around the poor, around the sick, I see light, a light that we do not have."
Incredible history, and we're so grateful to Wanda, the niece of Pier Giorgio Frassati, for taking time to talk to us, because as you can imagine, so many people are requesting interviews at this moment because of the joy and the excitement of this canonization, which again will be live here on EWTN across the global network tomorrow. Now, switching back to Carlo Acutis, we've been talking a lot about his earlier life, but we want to talk for a moment now about his final days, because he died at the age of only 15 years of age from leukemia, just very soon after being diagnosed with a form of cancer. And Alan Holdren went to the hospital where he passed away to find out the impact that he had then and is still having today.
Carlo Acutis died on October the 12th, 2006 at the St. Gerardo Hospital in Monza, a few miles away from Milan. A hospital with a long history and deep tradition. A hospital of saints, as the chaplain, Father Riccardo Brena, told EWTN News. Founded by St. Gerardo in the year 1174, it has been the place of saints because it was here that the parents of St. Therese of the Child Jesus, Louis and Marie Zélie Guérin Martin, performed their first miracle, which led to their beatification. This hospital also saw the birth of St. Gianna Beretta Mola's 4 children. St. Gianna was the first canonized saint after St. Charles Borromeo in the Diocese of Milan. And most recently, in 2006, the future saint Carlo Acutis lived out his last days here.
Però Carlo ci insegna una cosa.
Carlo teaches us one thing. He teaches us that when suffering comes, there is a position in life that can help us to welcome it, and at least accept it. Because welcoming and accepting suffering means for a Catholic to unite it with the cross of Jesus. And when you have the crucifix, you are in pain, as Jesus was in pain for you, to save you. That cross becomes lighter and less heavy because it is offered to the cross of Jesus.
Quella croce diventa più leggera e meno pesante, perché è offerta alla croce di Gesù.
Father Riccardo Brena became the hospital chaplain in 2022, but in a short time he understood how the memory of Carlo Acutis was alive and present in this place, and especially how the example of the future saint is an inspiration to many patients.
Carlo ha accolto.
Carlo welcomed this moment of his pain and suffering, as if he was ready for this passage into a greater life than the one he was leaving. It is as if he had divested himself of his youth in order to offer it to the Lord, and this offering was noticed by the doctors and nurses. As a boy who did not complain about his pain, who did not complain about anything that was happening to him, but who had brought it upon himself to see it as a fulfillment of his life.
Carlo Acutis passed by very quickly here at St. Gerardo. He was a very bright star, but a meteor. This is the recollection of Dr. Claudio Cogliati, president of the hospital, who traces the hospitalization of Carlo Acutis. With the help of his staff, he continues to keep the memory of the future saint burning. At the same time, he keeps reminding us of what the purpose of the healthcare staff is at St. Gerardo Hospital in Monza.
I think what we must give is not to make people lose hope. That is, hope must never die. And even if we can't manage to treat the patient to the end, we have to give our best care. But hope must never die, even for those kids who don't make it.
What is beautiful, of course, because he's a millennial saint, you have all that home video footage, which is extraordinary to see, really brings the saint to life. Now, we're talking about Carlo Acutis, about his final days there in the hospital. I'm joined by a special man now, an artist, Johnny Verba, originally from Chicago, now living in the beautiful
city of Denver.
That's great. In Colorado. You have created this incredible piece of art. I was watching it on YouTube. It's like a mosaic, but made not out of tiles, out of what?
Out of 1,000 miniature toys and other accessories, of course. As you mentioned earlier on this special episode, you said tangible parallels. The piece is tangible, and what's more tangible than the physical? Of course, kids can come up to it and relate. So, of course, there's lots of other toys incorporated as well.
Because the amazing thing is, and we can see it there on the screen, when you look at it from a distance, it looks like a mosaic. But when you look up close, you see that it's all figurines. And tell me about the type of toys that you use to put it together. Look at that. That must have taken you ages.
Absolutely. This took actually 500 hours over the course of 9 months. Actually, my now girlfriend, Allie, mentioned to me Carlo Acutis for the first time last year. And I said, I want to make a piece of art worthy to gift to Antonia Acutis. And that has been the goal since then. Of course, I've spoke at different Catholic churches.
Oh, you have the game controllers there as well, and the football nets.
Exactly. Yes, the football nets, the game controllers, everything that meant something to Carlo is incorporated.
You mentioned your girlfriend, who's standing off camera here as well, must have a lot of patience as well. That you were dedicated. I can't this evening meet up for the cinema because I'm working on the mosaic.
Yes, that helps in our relationship for sure. But yes, Allie was the one that introduced me, and just like Carlo, we can actually see now what's being shown is that little that nest egg at the bottom. You can see the cables coming out. Those show all the different languages that Carlo's website was translated into, reaching all continents.
And the amazing thing is that it's 3D. It comes to life. You can go up and it jumps out at you.
Yes.
And you've been bringing this and showing it in schools and to students and to various different people. What has the reaction been?
It's been incredible because the original meeting was supposed to be with Antonia after the canonization. This was canceled due to the passing. But I met a woman named Kelly Legamaro, and she was the one to help me actually get engaged with parishes. But students come up and they have a dialogue. It's not just a monologue, me speaking at you, but it's an engaging conversation for them to learn about the first millennial saint.
By the way, so many saints, so many people you could dedicate your time and your talents to. Why did you pick Carlo Acutis?
I picked Carlo Acutis. I really related to him. Once Allie had mentioned him to me, I did some research and I read a couple books, of course, Monsignor Anthony Figueiredo's book, and I realized, oh gosh, Carlo's story is so similar. I was the one bringing my parents to Mass. I was the one that was going out and using social media to preach the gospel, and I just realized, man, there are so many young people that are bringing their older generation back to the church.
And Johnny, the cool thing about you is that you're using your talent for art and for sculpting and for mosaics, but you're using your talent for digital evangelization as well, because I found you through your YouTube page. So you're merging the two and blending them, which is wonderful. And hey, thank you so much for coming to talk to us about it.
Thank you so much.
It's been awesome to have you on. And take a look at that monitor, because that's a live shot of myself and Johnny sitting here in the studio with St. Peter's behind us. But I think we can take a look at St. Peter's Square now. There is Pope Leo XIV. That's a live look at him on the Pope Mobile, going through the crowd right now as we speak. And don't forget, right after this program here on EWTN in Europe, and check the listing for the part of the world you're watching in, we will have coverage of Pope Leo addressing the crowd right here on EWTN. And we'll take a moment just to look at those beautiful scenes of all those young people who have really started to gather today for these canonizations happening tomorrow there in St. Peter's Square. And of course, I have to stress again that we will have all of the coverage live and uninterrupted here on EWTN. We begin our coverage at 9 a.m. Rome time. So if you're watching on our European satellite across this continent, you can tune in at 9 a.m. We'll be on for an hour before the canonization, which starts at 10 a.m. If you're a viewer over across the pond in the great United States of America, well then, you know what? You're going to have to get to bed early and set your alarm. Isn't that right, Johnny? Because 3 a.m. Eastern is when we go live, and we want you to join, have a watch party, bring your friends over, because this is a great moment in our church. And of course, remember the first canonizations of Pope Leo XIV. So it's really special. And of course, the program will be repeated if you are deep in your slumber later in the day. Check your local listings on EWTN.com. It has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us here on this Saturday morning live from Rome. And we will have more again tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. local time here in Rome. We'll talk to you then. Have a lovely Saturday. God bless.